Welcome to the JCPS series on elementary school multi-tiered systems of support for behavior. The focus of this module is how student intervention teams consider evidence-based or high-leverage practices. We'll talk about the nature of evidence-based practices and dig deeper into what this means in terms of student behavior. This work is different from the school-wide behavior team's work, as that team focuses on Tier 1 universal behavior instruction and concerns, while the student intervention team focuses on individual students needing Tier 2 and/or Tier 3 supports. In the area of behavior, high-leverage practices, or HLPs, are those strategies that have evidence for the probability and size of their positive effect on student behavior. One way to think about HLPs is that they are our best chance for a positive outcome. Of course, no practice works for every student every time, but some offer a higher probability of positive effect. It makes sense to start with those practices that maximize the probability of success. While HLPs should be in place for all students as a part of MTSS Tier 1, data indicating increased risk for a student or students warrants consideration of how HLPs might be enhanced, increased, or altered to better fit student needs. While there are plenty of practices, strategies, and tactics that are supported by evidence, it's more efficient to talk about the key features of these practices or what makes them effective. While this isn't super complicated, it's not well understood by many people in schools. The student intervention team has responsibility for selecting evidence-based practices and for explaining this logic to others in the school. For effective intervention, the student intervention team must consider three simple areas. First, we need to consider what strategies to use to teach functional replacement behavior in the same manner we teach any academic subject. Second, we must consider how to support student success through environmental arrangements. As any teacher knows, if the environment is inconsistent and chaotic, instruction is unlikely to be successful. Finally, we'll talk about the provision of feedback for student behavior. There are effective ways to provide feedback in a high-leverage manner. These three keys are not separate. Teaching expected behavior is a requisite task in the development of a positive learning environment, and performance feedback is an essential component of effective instruction. We'll compartmentalize our discussion by these three keys. While the MTSS team may not be involved in the development of more individualized interventions, their leadership in advocating to the student intervention team for use of HLPs is essential. Let's take a step back. In the last module, we talked about the behavior pathway. Recall that students behave for a reason, and by looking at how behavior and environment interact, we can determine the circumstances under which behavior is likely and the consequences that maintain it. Once we understand why behavior is happening or what purpose it serves for the individual, we can consider appropriate behaviors that might serve the same purpose. We can then teach these replacement behaviors using effective instruction. It is important to realize that when a misbehavior is functional, helping the student get or avoid things, if they're not taught a replacement behavior, it's unlikely the student will do it on their own. Recall that the behavior pathway for the student helped us determine their noise-making behavior functioned to access attention from the teacher. A simple replacement is to teach them to raise a hand to call the teacher over. It's unlikely that the student does not know how to do this. They don't do it because calling out works better. So instruction won't be about how to raise a hand, but why to raise a hand. Similarly, consider that our behavior pathway determined another student's cursing in math class functioned to help with escape from frustrating math work. In this case, providing attention will not be effective. The teacher will need to teach the student an alternative manner of asking for a break or getting assistance to lessen frustration. Again, it's unlikely that the student does not know how to raise a hand. They have learned that noise-making works well and works fast. The teacher will need to teach them why raising a hand is a better option. Let's listen to the behavior team discussing this case.
So we all agree that Eric's behavior is to get attention.
Right, but he doesn't just want the teacher's attention, he wants something. So he uses those noises to get what he wants.
Okay, so more specifically, the function of his behavior is to gain access to something that he needs from you to like use the bathroom or ask a question or just get some help. So what we have to start thinking about is what does a typical student do in the classroom to get the teacher's attention?
Yeah, this seems like a lot for just attention. I mean, we know he wants attention. Why not tell him just to stop, or you walk, slap, steer, and wellness?
Well, first, we've tried that and it hasn't worked. And secondly, like if he has the motivation to make noises to get attention, then he's not going to stop until he learns a better way to get that positive attention.
Well, in my classroom, raising your hand, waiting for me is what our more successful students do.
Right. So he knows how to raise his hand. He just doesn't do it. So why is he going to start now?
He doesn't do it because it's faster to get attention when he's just yelling out.
Exactly. So we have to teach him the why of the behavior. And we have to teach him what will happen when he raises his hand and what will happen when he makes the noises. We have to teach him that raising his hand will get him that positive attention rather than making the noises.
That's really going to change how I do business with Eric.
Yeah, so just make sure that when he makes noises, don't respond to those noises because it gives him the negative attention. But when he does raise his hand, make sure that you are responding to him raising his hand so that he can get the appropriate attention.
Won't this just be an incentive to make louder noises?
It might, but that's part of our instruction. We have to teach him that making the noises is not going to get what he needs and raising his hand is. We just have to be very explicit with that.
Again, the role of the student intervention team is to explain and advocate for a function-based approach to all interventions. At Tier 1 or any other level, teaching replacement behavior is no different than teaching academics and is best done in an explicit manner. Explicit instruction begins with a communication of the rules, what we want the student to do. You can think of explicit instruction by thinking of the concept of clarity. Remember, teaching behavior uses the same logic as teaching academics. We start by telling students what they need to do and why. This involves modeling and demonstrations to enhance clarity. We must consider the students and develop examples that are real to them. We demonstrate logical behaviors by using examples the students are likely to experience in the real world. The more students understand what and why it's required and see how it applies to their lives, the more likely they are to comply. So we can break explicit instruction into those three pieces: clarity of what the behavior is, clarity of why the behavior is important or how it is functional, and clarity of how to use it in the real world. For student intervention teams, these concepts are as important in considering instruction of school-wide expectations as they are in teaching specific replacement behaviors at Tier 3. Let's look closer at clarity of behavior. Explicit instruction involves the teacher stating the behavior and explaining while demonstrating. This mix of physical modeling with verbal explanation is most effective. Some believe that presenting only parts of the key skill and asking students to explore or discover is a preferable strategy for introducing new content. It is the role of the student intervention team to advocate for effective practices, pointing to research as proof that new information be presented in a clear and direct manner. We've separated the what and why of clarity, but these two pieces happen together. Still, it's difficult to explain a replacement behavior without also telling the students why it's important. The why is a rationale, a connection back to function. Watch how this team considers function as a part of teaching a replacement behavior for cafeteria behavior at Tier 1, focusing on both what to do and why.
So why do we think that students are pushing and bunching up in line? Like, what's the purpose of that behavior?
Well, it seems pretty obvious. They're eager to get to lunch, and that eagerness causes them to bunch and shove in the line.
Yeah, they don't have that problem getting to the classroom.
Right.
Okay, so if the function is to get to lunch more quickly, like what can we do to teach them to get there appropriately?
Well, if we stop the line every time they start to bunch up and push, that would be us making the behavior less functional, and it actually will slow down the line.
Stopping the line, do you really think we need an intervention just to reinforce that negative behavior?
No, but what we do teach is teach them how to make the line go faster. So you show them that keeping an orderly line is actually a faster line. And for safety purposes, we'll have to stop the line and make it orderly if it gets too bunched up where the students are running into each other.
Yeah, so we can even ask the cafeteria staff to verbally praise the lines that are orderly to reinforce that your line is moving quicker when you are going through the line in an orderly fashion.
Sure, but what are we teaching them to do?
What does an orderly line look like?
Well, students are far enough apart, their elbows are not touching anyone else, there's a straight line. I think we can model and teach both of those things as well.
Right, so those are behaviors we can describe and model, and then getting through lunch quickly would be the rationale.
Note that the discussion of a replacement behavior focused on what successful students would do. Effective replacement behaviors must be relevant, look like what others would do. The third piece of explicit instruction, clarity of how to use behavior in the real world, refers to the student's ability to generalize behavior outside of teaching. That a student can use a skill when asked to do so, but then does not use it under natural circumstances, is a failure of instruction. But first, let's talk about small group interventions. Teaching to small groups can be done at any tier. At Tier 1, groupings allow for differentiated instruction. At Tiers 2 and 3, small groups are used to teach specific content that might otherwise not be part of the school curriculum. This may include topics like social skills, emotional regulation, or organizational skills. When planning small group instruction, the team must consider basic logistics, including when to meet, where to meet, who will teach, who needs to attend, and what the key skills should be. Here are some basic recommendations for planning to create small group instruction for behavior. First, because we're talking about behaviors and emotions, there may be some topics that are sensitive, and it's best if groups can meet in an area away from other students. Second, it's best if meeting times are scheduled to be consistent, at a regular date and time. As we've discussed, effective instruction is developed in a similar manner regardless of the content, but it's important that the teacher has knowledge of the content area. Fortunately, most of the skills we teach at the elementary level are fairly basic, and most adults would be proficient with content after a simple reading. Finding the right teacher is an issue of who is available as opposed to who has the expertise. However, when considering behaviors related to trauma, there is an advantage to having a teacher with expertise in this area. Often, student intervention teams create groups and then set out to find students to fill them. But this is not logical. Instead, teams should use their screening data to identify students at risk and then dig deeper to better understand what deficits might be apparent across identified students. Then, group instruction should be developed to teach to the unique needs of these students. Finally, groups should be scheduled to run for long enough to ensure that all students can demonstrate mastery of skills. This means scheduling for longer than what may be necessary. Listen to this team think through the development of small group instruction for behavior.
It looks like that we have about 6 kiddos that we need to figure out how we're going to get them into small groups and just logistically figure everything out.
Do we have these 6 kids? Are they same grade? What are their age, like the age range?
So we have 2 kids in 2nd grade, and then we have 3 kids in 3rd grade, and then 1 5th grader.
Okay, so see, the outlier would probably be the 5th grader, but what I'm thinking, since majority of the kids do need that social interaction, that an MHP could do, social stories or a small group that helps with that. The only thing would be, a 2nd grader to a 5th grader, the age is kind of, but if the 5th grader is the outlier, he can kind of get his own intervention and you can do the group with the other 5.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're kind of stretched thin right now. I mean, we already have Mr. John working the groups after school, and we have our check-in, check-out group set. So, I mean, who's going to be able to do this? I said the MHP, but does she have the time to do that? Is it something that we can add the caseload?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the tiered behaviors is where that person will get some of those kiddos. So you're supposed to be working the kids who need it. If these kids are identified as needing it, then I would say it had to be worked in somehow because these kids are going to be on the caseload anyways for
But I can already hear the teachers complaining, they're already missing enough being out of class. Now, how much time are we gonna take them out for social skills? And I get it, they need them, and I'm sure they would say, yeah, they need social skills. But how are we gonna do that in a way that we can still say, by doing this, it's going to help them do better in class because it's gonna meet their needs and give them what they're able to do?
I wonder if we could do that during breakfast time.
Or lunch bunch.
Well, I was thinking that, but if they all have different lunches, then they would
That's
again
true.
be missing something. That's why I was kind of went to the
And
breakfast piece.
this may be the way I look at it as well. They're going to be out of class with disruptive behaviors anyway.
That's
So
true.
if we're pulling them proactively to teach them replacement behaviors, in essence, sometimes the time is the same. If they're throwing chairs and being disruptive, they're out of class anyways.
Right.
So most of the time, these kids aren't in class all the time to begin with.
Right. So I know how hard it was to get our social skills program this morning, and any morning for the whole class, for the whole school. It's tough, finally getting every teacher doing that the first thing. So how are we going to do this? And really, what are we going to use? Because they're already getting social skills in the morning with their class. Obviously, they need more. What are we going to use? Any ideas about like a curriculum, or do you have any programs that you've used before they have experience with?
And also, don't forget about your ECE teachers that are in-house in your building too, because, according to some kids' IEPs, they might need social skills instruction, and they're already having those small groups in their classroom.
Yeah.
So we would have to ask if they would mind, just adding one more kid into
Where
the
they
social
could
skills
fit in.
instruction.
Ms. Rodriguez pulls some fifth graders to meet their IEP social skills. I wonder if we could attach into that.
Yeah.
What time does she do that?
It's usually after lunch. It's very scheduled, but most of the teachers will have something after lunch to be able to pull for. So
I'd have to look. Do any of these students have other interventions that they are receiving academically? Because we do have that intervention time too
I think
throughout the day.
the 1 5th grader, he is in interventions.
Okay.
And our second grader, one of the second graders is ESL, so I do know he gets pulled out for, ESL services. But that's the only two that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
We've talked about the components of effective instruction. These small groups should be taught using the same logic and procedures as we'd use to teach any academic skills. But as we get back to thinking about generalization, there are some things that must be considered as part of instruction. We want to teach behavior in ways that will help the student to use the skills in natural, real-world settings. Here's a basic set of generalization strategies, most of which are embedded within the lesson content. You'll see that the different types of clarity aren't totally separate, as one impacts the other. As a first strategy, even when teaching small groups, the concept of function is important. We must identify appropriate replacement skills by observing others in the environment. Recall considering what successful students do. We'll want to make clear to students why these behaviors are important and to introduce naturally occurring reinforcers. The peer attention, successful interactions, and other outcomes that maintain positive behavior. Second, we know that engagement and practice with feedback are essential components of effective instruction. When teaching behavior, this means providing students with opportunities to practice skills through role-playing. To make sure these are representative of authentic situations, we want to select real-life scenarios. Ask teachers to provide examples of times when these students had problems with each skill. These examples then become the role-play scenarios during group. In addition to using natural role-play scenarios, generalization is enhanced by considering locations, contexts, and conditions under which problems have occurred in the past, and then either bringing those circumstances into role plays or even moving groups to natural locations for practice. The more varied and natural the examples, the better in terms of predicting generalization. Third, we'll want to teach a range of skill variations, as it's unlikely that one skill will suffice for all situations. For example, walking away is one skill for dealing with conflict, but it is not always possible. So we need to teach a range of possibilities and talk about the conditions that may or may not be effective. Finally, we can promote generalization by making sure that demonstrations of skills in natural settings are reinforced. A major part of helping new skills stick in novel environments is enlisting teachers, parents, and others to prompt appropriate behavior and be on the lookout for examples to praise. We may create situations for students to use their new skills so that we have opportunities to provide positive feedback. Watch as this team talks about effective instruction of a replacement behavior.
So in these groups, what is going to be our main focus? Because I know most of these kids have peer conflicts, and that's a thing that arises a lot of times. So what could be our focus, and then what resources do we have that we could already use, especially thinking about our Tier 1 systems that we have in place as well?
What's being taught in the morning? Like, what is the process for peer ignoring already found in our social skills curriculum? It's a blank to me. But if we could tie it to that, because they're getting that anyway. Now, we know it's not enough. But if we could tie it to what they get in the morning, and then we could go a little bit farther when we pull them, then at least it helps reinforce the message that they hear every morning with their morning meeting groups.
At the previous school that I was at, we used this program, and I can send you guys the link for our students that were in Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. So I can send you that because it was very successful, and it kind of tied back to our Tier 1 as well. It blended very well with that.
I can talk to Vanessa at Social Emotional Learning, and we can see what she has. I know they've reached out to us countless times saying if they need more. They even said they come in to demonstrate. And I wondered if maybe they can come to demonstrate with us, or at least give us that information so we can plan going forward, because that's a resource we can tap into. They're willing to come out. They want to come out, and I guarantee they have probably that program as well that you talked about, but more programs or more just something that would need to give us that boost for this small group.
Absolutely.
What if we did something restorative with the group, since there's conflict, them working together to do a project for the little kids, or helping the little kids read, they can go read a book to the little kids, something that they have to work together to accomplish, something, to put back in their community.
Yeah, love that real life application.
I do too. And backpack.
There you go.
Give them some backpack.
And
skills as well.
just throwing this out, we could probably tie this group into some sort of pride bucks, since the kids get pride bucks anyway. I don't think the teachers would be opposed to this small group earning some extra pride bucks if they show improvement in peer conflict or whatever the benchmark we're going to set.
Yeah.
It's just a way to maybe reward them for what they've been doing, and just to praise them and to say, hey, great job, thank you for doing this. Give them a little bit of motivation to continue on, because it's probably not going to be the easiest thing for them to step into this role. We know it, we see the data, but it just may help them, just give them some motivation to do that.
I think one thing to keep in mind too is, depending on who we end up getting to teach the groups, making sure that we get modeling for them. So if it's an ECE teacher that doesn't see that morning routine, make sure that we're getting them in classrooms to see that, and or us modeling for them. So we know that it's done correctly and it would be effective.
Yeah. You mentioned restorative. We can get with MTSS behavior and have them come in and help as well.
Yeah, and I think that it'll just be a good overall reminder for adults and for kids that if we are rewarding kids, with our pride bucks and our school systems that we already had in place, then it's also putting it back on the forefront of the adults to remember to reiterate, but be safe,
Yes.
be responsible
Our Tier
and all that.
1s, our
Exactly.
Tier 1s,
Yeah, tying it back. Yep.
Exactly.
Instruction is at the heart of effective interventions for behavior. But to be effective, instruction must consider function, be explicit about replacement behaviors, and include strategies to promote generalization. There are hundreds of different strategies for dealing with behavior, but what separates those that are effective from those that aren't is the degree to which instruction is at the heart of the intervention.